Hey everyone, and welcome to Recharge the Podcast. I'm David Coe. My guest today is a film producer, author, philanthropist, and a former U.S. ambassador whose work has become a powerful force for healing and service, despite suffering unimaginable grief. In her best-selling memoir, Think You'll Be Happy, she opens up about her amazing upbringing and her journey to forgiveness. Let's recharge with Nicole Avant. Hi, Nicole, and welcome to Recharge. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet
I
you finally.
Yes, I am so excited for our conversation today, and I know there's so much for us to talk about. But as I was thinking about our conversation and thinking about just this incredible journey, and personally and professionally that you've been on, and before I just get into this, I always start these podcasts and these conversations with a question to every guest. And this question really kind of centers off the name of this podcast, which is Recharge. And the whole premise of Recharge is to think about your mental health like a cell phone battery. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to know, as we sit down for this conversation, how's your battery today and why?
My battery is great today. And the reason why, honestly, is because last night, in preparation for this conversation with you, I thought I definitely need to meditate more, get grounded more, because I'm in the middle of this winter comes and I love to purge. The new year comes
Oh,
and I want to purge. So I'm in this mode of cleaning out my desk drawers and cleaning out my closets and giving things away. And then everything was a mess yesterday. I just put everything all over the room. And I thought, oh, great. Now I'm going to go on the Calm podcast and be all over the place. So I did extra meditation because, like you, and I love the name Recharge. I always try to remind my friends, my family, myself all the time, of course, that every time I'm off, I'm always reminding myself, right, because I didn't recharge with source. I didn't sit down for a second. I always have to, if my I always look at my phone, I look at my computer. Oh, it's on 30%. Oh, it's
mm.
on 70%. There's nothing wrong with my phone or the computer. It's I didn't charge it. And we're the same. And I do notice a difference when I don't connect and when I don't focus on calming my mind, calming my heart, just really centering myself. So I feel very good today considering. So your podcast pushed me to recharge in the perfect timing.
I love that. I love that. Well, I tell you, out of all the guests we've had, you're the first one to start and talk about just kind of purging and
Ah,
kind of giving things away as part of that. And I got to tell you, every year and throughout the year, I like to purge as well. And
mhm.
sometimes I find myself just with a lot of clutter around, whether it's the
Yeah.
office or whether it's at home. It just feels nice sometimes to kind of simplify that space, right? And it really just helps me then to kind of focus what's in front of me. I don't do as well when there's just all this clutter around me.
No, because the energy scattered with all the scattering of things. And my mom used to tell me all the time when I was growing up, like, clean out your desk. I said, what if I cares if I just she said, if you just do one drawer, you'll feel so different. And I go back to that all the time because she was right. It does make a difference. It does shift your energy because you're not looking at it saying, "Oh, I have to tackle that. Oh, I can't find this." It just recenters your energy. So,
I love that.
I did the quiet.
And I'll tell you some of the things I do too. It's like you don't have to tackle everything at once. You can just do things a little bit at a time, just like you're saying. I think just it's
Yes.
like really important. Sometimes people go in there and they're like, "Oh my God, I got to do all these things at once." But
Mhm.
just one draw at a time. That's so good. That's great advice.
Yeah, I try to do that. Sometimes I am the person that tries to do 10 rooms at once. And then my husband comes in like, what the hell happened to my house? I'm cleaning but one drawer, one room at a time is the way to go.
That's good. Then you can tell your husband, "Hey, pick up a drawer. It's
Yeah.
your turn next, right?"
Yeah, exactly. I did that, by the way. Wasn't happy, but
Well, I know that so many of our listeners today already know you and they know about your remarkable parents, but there's some that don't. And your father, Clarence, was one of the most just influential figures in not only kind of music history, but he was just so well known within the community. He had many kind of titles from the Black Godfather, and your mother, Jacqueline, was a noted philanthropist and community activist as well. And there's so many remarkable things that I know that stand out. But one of the things that I've seen is that in the interviews that sometimes you do, you say these things about your parents over and over again that are just so great. What is it about your parents and the way that you were raised that really just kind of make it so natural for you to have this amazing outlook on life?
I think because my dad's born in 1931,
Mm.
very rough conditions, obviously at that time for anybody who was poor, anybody in that rural time, white,
Yes.
black, didn't matter. It was tough. And my dad, he picked tobacco at 5 years old. He was picking cotton at 5 years old. He was doing
Mm.
very, very hard things, but always had this reverence for life. Always knew that being alive was a privilege, that being alive
Mm.
it was something that wasn't always given to everyone. And so he understood that, well, I'm here for a reason. And it looks bleak, but as bleak as it looks, I hope that I can reach my full potential. And he didn't know what his fullest potential would ever be, but he
Mm.
never gave up, is what I loved. He really understood that life is a gift, it's a privilege, and it also is a game.
Hmm.
And so his outlook was, and my mom had the same outlook, a very different upbringing. My mom was in New York City, so completely different upbringing, but they both had this outlook that we should honor what we have in front of us and honor the people who came before us and really my mom always used to say, make a go of it. Just make a go of it. But you have to be disciplined and you have to be focused. And so my mom was very much in the mind soul space of, an undisciplined soul, she used to say, is always going to be a disaster because you can be very smart, you can be really smart, you can be really talented, but if people can't depend on you, it doesn't matter. And so
Right.
she really gave me, and I didn't love it so much when I was raised by her, and because it felt like such a tough school sometimes. I mean, she was loving
Yeah.
and she was kind, but she was a disciplinarian. And they didn't want me to take life for granted. They didn't want me to take the privileges I had for granted. And I don't ever want to waste the opportunities that I'm given or waste the blessings that I've been given. But again, that outlook I think came from it was passed on within my family. And my dad would always say, of course we wanted to give up. Of course we wanted to just, be done with it. Things were hard, but
Mm.
we don't come from that. You live. Again, he'd always tell me, your purpose is to be alive. Your purpose
That's right.
is to live for life. That's it. And be good, do good as much as you can. Yes, you'll make mistakes. Yes, you'll fall out of line. Yes, you'll go off course. But if you come back to center, if you have a center,
Mm.
you've got to have a center.
That's right.
And when you have that, and thank God they gave me that, I think that's what's giving me my outlook on life of I'm a happy person. I'm a happy soul. It doesn't mean that I'm happy every day. It doesn't take away from me being a happy.
Yes.
There's a
Yeah.
difference.
Yes. Yes. And happy person, happy soul. But as we go back, actually, you said something about tough love here with your parents, right? And was there a moment in your childhood where it just kind of flipped, where you had that appreciation? Because I've got two girls here, so I'm looking for some advice as we talk here at 18 and 15. And is there a moment here that just switches and they come back and they say, and you went, thank you.
Yes, for me, I mean, I really got to college, and every time everything outside of college, I really turned around and said, "Wow." Because once I got out of the house and once I experienced, had made friends and different backgrounds, and then saw whose parents were just as committed as mine or even more, and then who didn't have anybody.
Right.
And the people who didn't have anybody cheering for them, rooting for them, disciplining them, I thought, "Oh my God." That's when it flipped and I said, oh, I am really fortunate to have someone that does care about me so much that
Mm.
they are taking the time to set boundaries. They are taking the time to lay out rules. My mom would always say if I'd push up against her and I'd say, well, why can't I do this? Sometimes it was as simple as these aren't our values.
Ah.
So the answer is no, and it was done. But I really look back at it now and I'm so grateful how fortunate I was to have parents that took the time to really raise me and care for me and support me and correct me. I think correction is, I think that's a lot of people don't want to, oh, I don't want my kids not to like me. I don't, but we all know. We
Yeah.
appreciate the parent who takes the time to really raise us.
Yeah, and my daughter's in New York right now and a freshman in college. And I wrote this thing down that you just said about sometimes I find myself explaining things a little bit too much. I'm like, yeah, these aren't part of our values. I think that's so simple, and it's a great way to frame it and a great way to just to say, okay, this is it,
Right,
end of
because there's really
conversation.
nowhere to go. I even ended up using it, with our kids here, and it worked one day. It just Ted said, "Oh, that kind of stopped that train."
I love
So
it.
I know.
Well, switching gears a little bit and just talking about how you grew up. There was so many people around you, and you grew up with real icons. Whether it's Quincy Jones or Sidney Poitier or Muhammad Ali, just to name a few people of the many that were around you. That just seems like such an extraordinary childhood. But despite all of this exposure to these really larger than life people around you, your parents continued to raise you with a really strong sense of just service and essentially around community as
Yeah.
well. How did you grow up in that world?
Mhm.
And then with your parents keeping you just so grounded?
They both did a great job, but I have to give this credit to my mom because she was a big believer in the more you're blessed, the more you share your blessings.
Mm,
Period. And she also knew that she never wanted me to feel guilty for being blessed either. So she had a very good balancing act for me and my brother. But the beauty, I think the difference with my mom is that she made sure that when she did community work, that I went with her to do the community work. So I
ah,
was not just in the bubble of entertainment. I wasn't just in sports and film and TV. It was, no, there are plenty of other people out in the world that do not live like you, but they're
mm,
not less than you and you're not better than them. You're
mm.
just different. But I want you to come out and experience it and see how other people live and also, and learn from them too. It wasn't just, oh, they don't have as much as we do, so we're going to teach them everything and give them everything. I learned
Yeah.
a lot of lessons from people who, didn't have the financial means that I did. Didn't mean that their wisdom wasn't ahead of mine. It didn't mean that they
Sure.
couldn't give me anything. And that's what I loved, that my mom also loved to take us, around anywhere she could travel. She grabbed me and my brother and we went as a family, or she would just take us. But exposure to other people, to other cultures,
Mm.
to other situations is extremely important when you can. And I think that I loved comfort all the time, and she always put me outside of my comfort zone. She said, listen, you see these people around you who may be famous and have big titles, but they are human beings first.
Mm.
And many of them struggled so much. For example, Hank Aaron. I mean, everyone looks at him like, oh, he's so great. And he broke Babe Ruth's record. And, what an extraordinary man. And he was for sure. But breaking Babe Ruth's record, for example, that came with death threats against
Mm.
him, against his family. Things weren't easy. Everyone looks at the icing, but the cake and the journey to get to these highlights of
Mm.
people's lives, I think people love to look at the icing and they don't realize the cake underneath is not always pretty. It's not always easy. It's not always fair. And I think I was very fortunate to get the flip side of people like that. They would always share the other side, the flip side of the shiny object of the icing, like I said. And
Yeah.
and that really helped shape who I am and how I look at the world and how I want to show up in the world.
Yeah, and that cake analogy is so good because you're right, because everyone does look at the
Mhm.
frosting, but doesn't
Yes,
realize that cake may not be smooth on the inside. It may not be all the same shape. It may have different forms, but the reality is most people just look at the outside and just look
correct.
and say, okay, it looks really nice, but doesn't
Right.
realize like about what it took to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And as you think about your own childhood and the people that you grew up with and those experiences, What effect did that have on your own kind of mental outlook in life?
Each and every person around me, and even including my grandparents and some of my aunts and uncles, the one thing was never quit. Keep
Mm,
going, keep going, keep going. You could pause. We all need to pause, obviously. We all need to pause and we all need to redirect and we need to pivot many times in life. But whatever you do, the message in my family, the mantra was don't quit. Don't quit on yourself. Don't quit on your life. Don't quit, because you don't really know. My dad would always say the greatest commodity we have is time. But time, you don't know how much you're going to have. You don't know when it's going to stop. You
sure.
don't know, we all think we do, but we don't. And so he said, if you really know that waking up, if you really know, as my mom would say, stop trying to live as if you're going to live forever. Stop
Yeah.
making decisions as if you're gonna regret the decision in 200 years. You're not going to be alive in 200 years. You're not going to be alive in 50 years. So why are you stressing about something? Really look at it from that perspective. But I love that they gave me the message of that life again is a privilege and don't quit. Don't quit on yourself, but keep going.
Absolutely. Nicole, I really want to spend some time just talking to you about your book. It was so moving.
Thank
Um, and your book is titled Think You'll Be Happy, Moving Through with Grief, Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. And you wrote this book after the tragic and unexpected death of your beloved mother, Jacqueline. And you talk about being just stuck in the writing process. And writers do get stuck in the writing process. And it was really your father who suggested that you write about your mother.
you.
What did that do for your grief and your own healing process?
It really saved me, to be honest with you. I mean, to have my father here living with me after my mom tragically died, like you just said, and I moved him in immediately. And I said, well, great. Now I was writing a book and I was doing this and I was doing that, and I don't want to do anything. I didn't feel like waking up. I didn't feel like doing anything. And he was so great. And he looked at me because he was in his 90s, 91. He said,
Yeah.
listen, I understand you're upset. Of course we are upset. And of course we all miss your mom. And grief is a bitch. Number one, you're going to have the
Mm,
only way out is through. So we all know that. The only way out is through. And my advice to you is keep going. Are you going to allow this person who just took your mother's life so tragically, are you going to give him your power? Is he going to
mm,
take your life too? You have a life to live. You have things to do in this life. So I'm here. And he would make a joke like, I'll help you write your book. I could even be the editor, because he was a terrible speller. So he'd say, I'll edit your book for you. But it really helped me get through. I said, okay. And then I'd go at it with my editor and one day at a time, slowly but surely. And the more and more we spoke about my mom, and I would recollect all these stories. It was great because it was a
mm,
healing process of me laughing again, me smiling again, me focusing on wonderful memories of her versus this one final thing at the end instead of her life, which was so filled with goodness and strength and love and community. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, these are the things I want to focus on. And it really helped my healing journey.
mm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I am personally, as so many readers and listeners will be, so grateful for you just writing about grief.
Mm,
It's something that we all don't talk about.
yeah.
Similar to our mental health at work, it's something that there are conversations that are out there that we just don't have openly. And you being in the position that you are, we're just so open and how you grieve differently than people had expected you to grieve. And so, how did you give yourself that permission to grieve in your own way?
Mhm.
And what did that look like for you?
I think all of us, as you just said, we all grieve, right? So grief is a human emotion. All of us are going to feel it at some point. It doesn't have to be the death of a parent or the death of a human. It could be the death of a job. It could be the death of a dream. It's
Yes.
just the death of something, but it's something that you believed in or something that you loved or something that you hoped for. And then when it doesn't happen, there is grief, there is disappointment, and that's okay. The challenge is not to stay stuck and tethered to the disappointment for so long that you just can't move anymore. And I understand it's different from everybody. Some people have I have studied so many people throughout history. I've been fascinated by people, whether they, were born into slavery and or experienced the Holocaust or a
Mm.
concentration camp anywhere in the world,
Sure.
trafficking anywhere in the world,
Mm.
just difficult situations. I'm in awe of the people who didn't quit and who kept going and believed in something, that something better was going to happen. They didn't know where it was going to come from. They didn't know how it was going to come, but it did. And so for me, the grief was not a textbook. First of all, I couldn't call anybody and say, well, what
Mm.
did you do when,
Mm.
Schroeder broke in and murdered your mom? Like there was nobody for me to really call and
Mm.
talk through. But I also knew that the way I felt and the way I was raised is not the same as everybody else. So that's
Sure.
why I wanted to write and remind people that, I wanted to give tools of how I grieved,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that they're the Bible and they're the gold standard. It's just this is what helped me, and I hope it helps you too. And again, I'm so grateful that my dad gave me this and said, I really think writing about your mom and the lessons that you learned from her and will help you and be honest. I talk about in the book, I talk about my mom apologizing to me a few times later in life of,
Mm.
I really think I hurt your heart when I said this. I really wish I didn't do this. But that was her grief while she was alive. That was her
Yeah.
grief of, oh my gosh, now that I'm getting older and I'm looking back at my daughter and I'm watching her move through life, I remember times where I might have been too tough on her, where she thought she wasn't good enough, but it was me really just trying to keep her on the right path. But that caused her grief. She was sad about those things. And thank God the last birthday that we had together, and we have a shared birthday, our last birthday together, she said, I just want to bring up some things and I want to put them on the table and I
Yeah.
want to acknowledge them and I want to apologize. And I
Mm.
thought, after she passed away, I thought, wow, how fortunate were we that we were able to exchange that energy and actually heal that energy. I didn't even know she was carrying that, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I really didn't. And why she brought it up then, it's always that interesting thing about the way the universe works. Out of all the years, she's going to bring it up on the last time we ever shared a birthday. And so again, the grief she was carrying it, she was alive, I was alive. It was just, but it was a feeling of disappointing or hurting someone. And she had grief about that. She had
Mm.
sadness about that. She had disappointment. And the reason I shared it in the book is because I think that's also a very important thing that, when you get to the end of your life, you want to have as how do I say this? You don't want to carry so many regrets. We're all going to
Yeah.
have a few, but you don't want to have such a heavy bag of,
Yeah.
and the more really you take accountability and the more
Mm.
we all need to apologize at times. We just do. This idea of stop saying sorry. I understand that, but I also understand when you do something, you must take accountability. And the person you're asking to forgive you, they have the right to say thanks and yes, we can continue, and thanks and no thanks. We're not going to continue. So, I mean, I've forgiven a lot of people that aren't in my life, but I have zero animosity towards them at all. I don't even
Well,
want to carry that.
that was so beautiful in terms of how your mother was able to say these things to you.
Mhm.
And now as a mother for yourself, has that forced you to have that conversation sooner with your own children, or do you find yourself kind of
Yeah.
waiting?
No, I actually do. It's great. I
Mm.
actually definitely do it in the moment more.
Mm.
And I catch myself. And because I'm very much like my mom, and the kids laugh now, I say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I sound just like my mother. They go, oh, you're Jackie times 100 now. I have completely become her and more. But I'll remind them, like, sorry it landed that way, but you
Mm.
know where I'm coming from. And I just need you to get it together. And sometimes it comes off harsh, but they know where the intention is and they know it comes from a place of love, even if it doesn't land like that. But I will always try and take accountability.
So there was something you described in your book as the loneliest island, and I was curious about this because for myself, because we surround ourselves with lots of people at times, but
Mhm.
even when you're surrounded by lots of people who really care for you or who love you, you still can feel very lonely in that moment. So I'd love to understand like what you meant by it, grief as the loneliest island here.
Sometimes like you said, you can have 20 people in the room, but you know they really don't know exactly what you feel. Or sometimes I even felt, to be honest with you, oh, I'm going to burden them with what I feel because they're not going to know what to say. And then they're going to feel bad not knowing what to say. Then I'm going to feel bad that they feel bad. So it
Mm.
just kind of was very lonely of who do I even talk to about this? I don't even know. I don't know what to do. But then what I had to learn was sometimes it doesn't have to be talking. And the my friends showing up and my family members showing up and people checking in and I'd have friends saying, you know what, I'm going to be at your house and if you're taking a nap and you're resting, just know that I'm downstairs in the living room. Just know that I'm
Mm.
making dinner. Just know that a bottle of wine's down. Just know I'm here. And that actually was a really um, that helped me on my lonely island, in that lonely place
Yeah.
where it was such despair. I mean, it was such a
Mm.
low place because I was in such shock and I was in such just disbelief. And really, everything kind of fell on me. Again, I had a 91-year-old father who I moved in, and thank God he was healthy and thank God he can function on
Mm.
his own. But he had been with this woman for 54 years. So then I'm carrying his grief. And then I have
Mm.
a brother. And then not only that, David, it was my mom had friends all over the world,
Yeah.
all over the world. So everyone's letters of sympathy and calls of sympathy. So as much as it was loving, it was also very heavy. And I just felt very, very alone, knowing that I wasn't alone. But I felt alone for that moment. But I'm so grateful to every girlfriend, every friend of mine that just showed up. And again, would say, I don't have the right words. I'm not even going to
Yeah.
pretend I have the right words, but I'm going to be in your vicinity.
With all this outpouring of love that came, did you feel a responsibility to respond to everybody? Or how did you respond to folks
Yes,
that
in the
way?
beginning I did it. It was
Yeah.
great. One of my friends finally said, "What are you doing? Stop responding to my text." I said, "Well, then stop texting me." And he said, "No, I'm checking in and you don't have to respond." And in the beginning, I responded to everything. Then I
Mm.
stopped a little bit. And then, and then I kind of came back when I could, when I felt like it. But I did feel this need to respond to everybody only because everyone was in shock and
Mm.
everyone was grieving in their own way. And I felt very responsible for people's grief. And I had to learn to not carry everyone's grief, that it was okay for me not to carry everyone's grief. It's okay that they were grieving, but I wasn't responsible for carrying that. And that took
Right.
me a little while to get out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, when you are going through so much now, and let's say you have other people going through grief, it could be, like you said, a loved one, job, it could be a pet, it could be anything where you're just kind of grieving. How do you support others who are now going through grief, friends, family, or others? Like, how do you do that now? So if you're on the other side of it.
Yeah, I had a lot of lessons to learn because
Mm.
I thought, oh my gosh, I do this all the time where I'm
Mm.
saying, what do you want me to do? Give me something to do. Give me something to do. And again, I'm guilty of that. And we all do it from the right space. What I've learned now is, a friend of mine, for example, her mom just passed 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And I started remembering the texts that I loved, which were
Mm.
always, I love you. I'm here for you for anything at any time. I'm here for you. I showed up for her, let her do the memorial. But then I said, I know you've got it, but you know, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to ask you to give me something to do, but know that I'm here to do all of it. And then I would just do the things that I thought she needed. And if she didn't,
Mm.
she could just put it away. Versus, it's so nice. Really, the real text that came through that just said, I love you. And that was it. It
Ah,
wasn't, I'm sorry. It wasn't, I can't believe this happened. Oh, what a tragedy. I got a million of those. And then the ones where I just thought, ooh, that was so nice. It was just, I love you, period. And or I love you, a red heart. And it was just right. Because that's really what you want to know during any time of pain is that you're loved and that you're supported and that you're not alone. That you
Mm.
call on people and that people are actually going to show up. And sometimes people do want a pep talk and sometimes people don't. You
Mhm.
kind of have to just tiptoe around and see where they are. But I
Mhm.
heard somebody say this a long time ago and it stuck with me. And he said, the greater the tragedy, the less you say.
Huh.
And I thought, oh, wow.
Wow.
And then when I lived it, I
Mm.
thought that's why I love you landed so well for me in such a tragic time because it was the most simple, not a lot of words, but it felt like somebody was wrapping me in, a warm blanket.
That was such a powerful statement. To write that
Yeah.
down, I'm going to come back to that. I want to talk about forgiveness and letting go because I know a lot of people will be very
Mhm.
interested in this. And it's such a powerful theme throughout your book where you talk about forgiveness.
Mhm.
And you wrote, and I want to make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
The forgiveness is for you, not for the other people.
Mhm.
I don't want to carry these burdens. I want a peaceful heart. That's an incredible place to arrive at as I took a step back on such a violent loss.
Mhm.
What helped you choose forgiveness and how did you really get there?
Thank God this is where my grandmother comes in because she was
Mm.
such the spiritual warrior in the family, my dad's mom. And she would talk about forgiveness a lot when I was a child. And I'd say, well, how can you forgive that? And when I'd ask, but how could you forgive that heinous act? Or how could you? And she'd say, because you're looking at forgiveness in the wrong way. You're looking at forgiveness. You're asking me, how could you condone that behavior? She said, forgiveness has nothing to do with condoning a bad behavior. Forgiveness is for you. It
Mm.
is dropping basically all the anger, all the poison, all the resentment, because
Mm.
resentment and anger and all the revenge, all of this will really eat you alive. We all know that.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean you don't feel them. You should feel all of it. I'm not saying never to feel these things, but there's a difference in feeling things and then giving them a place to live in your life forever. There is a difference. So, yes, I had anger, I had resentment, I had frustration, I had disappointment, but I knew, David, if I didn't start releasing those emotions, that I was going to stay tethered to somebody I don't even know, to somebody I
Mm.
have zero respect for, to someone that's not making a difference in my. So, what am I doing? So, that's where I go back to. Forgiveness is a gift for yourself. It's the letting go of other things. I look at forgiveness as untethering myself from someone or something or a situation
Mm.
and re-anchoring. Where do I want to
Oh,
re-anchor?
that's
I
so
want
good.
to re-anchor in strength and I want to re-anchor in peace and I want to re-anchor in love. Like I said, I want to make sure that whomever did this to my mom didn't get to do it to someone else. Okay, we did that. That didn't mean I wasn't angry the whole time. It didn't mean I wasn't crying and wanted revenge, but I didn't want that to become my identity. And I
Mm.
think that we look back on terrible tragedies and then we stamp it on ourselves and say, this is who I am now. I'm now branded as this person who had these terrible, terrible things happen to me. I wanted to rebrand myself and make sure that I stayed in, I am Nicole Avant and I am, a good soul and I am a purposeful person and I am this. And yes, something tragic did happen, but that doesn't define me at all. It is not my ID. It's just not. And I didn't want that to be my identification. And my grandmother always taught me, she said, victorious people, truly victorious people, cannot be victims. You can't be a victim and victorious at the same time. You have to choose which one. And so, again, that's why I go back to forgiveness was for me. It's not condoning a behavior, but it is letting go. It is letting go and it's release and it's moving forward. And I never wanted to sit and stay in the pain, and I didn't want to sit and stay in the anger or disappointment. And unforgiveness will keep you stuck and keep you placed where you're not really going to get out.
Well, thank you for sharing that openness, that rawness. My conversation with Nicole was so powerful, I just didn't want it to end. So please stay tuned for part two.